So let me just start with the guy in the middle, Mark Halperin. Tell me right now, what are the 5 most important questions about the political year that we're in?
5.
Okay, take 10, but just tell me what are the questions that are most important that you're in search of. I mean, obviously we know one of them's going to be what's going to happen when Donald Trump talks to Paul Ryan. But I'm interested in the bigger questions in terms of what Trump's strategy might be. Who's he going to choose for a running mate? Who's Hillary going to choose for a running mate? What's her strategy going to be? Does Trump have a serious chance? Is there a path? Because we've seen recent polls in which suggested in certain very crucial states, they're very close.
Right. Okay.
Have at it.
Thank you all for coming. 5. I'm going to do this in no particular order. Right. I think, how does Donald Trump make the big decisions of this campaign and perform in the big moments? Selection of a running mate, convention in Cleveland, and the debates, which will be the most watched events of all time, bigger than Rhoda's wedding. So this will be big. 2 is, can Donald Trump convince people that he's ready to be president, qualified to be president? How many people in this room will admit in front of the group, raise your hand if you're going to vote for Donald Trump, raise your hand. Okay, and how many people think there are people in this room who secretly are going to vote for Trump but won't raise their hand? Raise your hand. Okay, now this may not be the perfect demographic to do that test, but I do. It is his neighborhood. I do that question all over the place. And you know, can Donald Trump become a place people go to vote because they want change as opposed to more of the same? 3, I think, is can Hillary Clinton be as likable, as engaging as Donald Trump? You look at the modern history in the television age, presidential elections. What are 2 things that are true of everybody who's won? Taller. I'm not big into prediction, but by November, Trump will still be taller than Hillary Clinton. And 2, more likable. Then not everybody likes Donald Trump, but even Hillary Clinton, you know, we talked in the clip there about his wedding. Hillary Clinton was asked, why'd you go to Donald Trump's wedding? She said, he's fun to be around. Anyone who's been around him knows he's fun to be around. He's engaging to be around. She's going to have to, I think, show people the private side of her, which we've all seen, which is more likable. 4, I think, is does the country want change so badly that they're willing to take a risk on him? Or can she convince people that stability is important? And then finally, I think the economy and President Obama's approval rating. If his popularity is rising, the economy is getting a little bit better. But if growth is still 2%, if his approval rating comes down, I think that could be pretty decisive. Getting a 3rd term for the Democratic Party is tough.
John, what would you add to that?
First of all, just thank you for those extraordinarily gracious introductions. You read them just like we wrote them, so
I don't think Mark would have allowed me if you had any editorial control.
Well, I should say you read them just like I wrote them. How about that? I agree with all of those things. They're really important. I think that there's 2 big questions that relate to Trump, and they are, can he fix the current problems that he has with 2 enormous and enormously important parts of the American electorate? That would be Hispanic voters and women voters. Right now, he's disapproved of by roughly the same percentage of those 2 groups. It's like in the mid-70s. Yeah. There's not a math or a map that accommodates being disapproved of by more than half of the electorate in the case of women and the crucial and fastest growing part of the electorate in Hispanics that will allow you to be president if you're at that level of disapproval with those 2 groups. I have no idea how he goes about fixing those problems, but they are very large and potentially disqualifying.
Taco Bowl didn't do it for you?
Yeah. But here,
I want to say I enjoy a taco bowl. Yeah. But I'm also not under the illusion that has anything to do with
But
Mexico.
then why is he within 4 percentage points of her in Florida and leading her in Ohio if all of this is...
Well, look, this is going to be, there's always, the election's always going to be close, somewhat close in America, right? You've got a very divided country. You know, we've seen this over the past few cycles. Very polarized country, 47-48% are Republicans, 47-48% are Democrats. What Trump is doing is maybe a little bit surprisingly, given the level of elite the elite division in the Republican Party over Trump. There's not as much division among Republican voters. Republican voters are coming home to Donald Trump as he's been named the presumptive nominee. And if you look historically, when you become the presumptive nominee, you get a boost, you get a bump, and your party starts to coalesce around you. And again, even though there are a lot of elite Republicans still arguing about, am I for Trump, am I against Trump, what could make me for Trump, the voters in the Republican Party are largely going to be satisfied with him, are going to come back to him. The last thing I'll say just really quickly, I think one of the biggest questions is this campaign going to be governed more by art or science, right? And all campaigns are about both. There's the slicing and dicing and the demographics and the targeting of states and how do you win this voter group and what neighborhood do you put what ad on.
Sounds like the Clinton campaign.
And it was the Obama campaign in 2000,
right, exactly.
in 2012 and 2008. It was the Bush campaign in 2004, 2000.
Right.
But there's also an art element to campaigning. There's the human element, the charismatic element, the spinning of the narrative, the catching lightning in a bottle.
What some might call the art of the deal.
Certainly, at least one would call it that.
Let me get Mr.
And so to me, that's a big question, right? Because she has, again, if you want to go to Mario Cuomo, poetry and prose, right? Prose is all she knows, right? And you wouldn't say that Trump's a poet, but he is.
No, I wouldn't say that.
But he is a much more, as Mark suggests, a much more dynamic, captivating figure who feels more of this moment and the frustrations of this moment for a lot of Americans than she does necessarily right now.
If Trump is
in
a
crowds and on camera.
If Trump is a poet, I'd say his main preferred form would be the baughty limerick.
Doggerel.
What Mario Cuomo said, as all of you know, was that campaign is poetry and governing is prose.
First of all, I'll give you the Texas version of a thank you for the introduction, which is, you're pissing on my leg, but it was warm and it felt good. Let that sink in.
Very classy state.
We're from Texas. That's right. We're from the frontier. We're from the country.
Okay.
I just want to back up a little bit because, and talk about sort of the macro elements that are going on here that are driving a lot of this. A few years ago, as I began to look at sort of the fundamentals of what was happening in this country and see the erosion of trust among voters toward government, toward politicians, toward the parties, and the sense that the country was headed in the wrong direction, concerned about economic future. And I went back and I said, I wonder how this looks compared to 1992, when there was this character, a businessman outsider named Ross Perot decided to run. And I went and looked at it. What was remarkable was how much worse those numbers are today, or a few years ago, than they were back in 1992. And in 1992, they were bad enough that this character from Dallas, Texas, as you recall, was leading Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush for 2 months of that election, and arguably, had he been a different candidate with the same message, might have won that election. So the opening for somebody to run as a businessman, outsider, not beholden to special interests, not with a political background, was enormous. Now, but the fact that it was Donald Trump is a surprise, but we shouldn't be surprised that somebody has captured that space of fundamental change that's so fundamental that, as Mark said, they're willing to risk somebody that might be risky because they've tried everything else and they've been let down.
What is it about Trump's record in business that suggests he'd be a good president?
He brings opposing sides together. I mean, he brings people that are arguing together and becomes a problem solver. And that's what a lot of people want in American politics today. And the other interesting thing about Trump is he's kind of post-ideological. I mean, he's not a very ideological candidate. And that's where a lot of the country is. They're like, at this point, I don't care if it's a Democratic solution or a Republican solution. Just give me solutions. And I think Trump is tapping into that as a businessman. He's a guy who says, I'm going to go in and I'm going to cut a deal.
Let's turn to the Democrats. Hillary Clinton. Bernie Sanders still winning primaries.
Might be winning one as we speak.
Exactly. How do you explain his phenomenon?
In every other industrialized democracy, there's a political party home for people who believe what he believes. We have this strange system, unlike every other one. We've got these two centrist parties. Any other one has something, social democrats, liberal democrats, whatever it's called, where you have people who believe in universal health care, single-payer universal health care, a much more a broader view for government in regulating the market, financial markets, and a worldview about the use of force overseas that's much more restrained than our Republican and Democratic presidents.
Free education.
Yeah. free stuff, as the Republicans would call it. And Bernie Sanders, through discipline and strong beliefs and a really good use of social media and television, now that shows like ours have put him on, is able to reach those tens of millions of people who share those views. So it's a little
and pay him $28.
Exactly. It's a little bit of luck that he was the right guy in the right place at the right time, but the overlap, much commented on, between Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, against special interest influence in our politics, against Washington special interests in general, against trade deals, a belief that the system is rigged against working class people. These are strongly held beliefs, and some of the longer term trends that Mark referred to are things that he's kind of rode the wave of, and he's exciting.
And he's authentic.
He's exciting.
Well,
He's exciting and authentic, and those are things that break through.
Three really important things. One, there was going to be a progressive challenge to Hillary Clinton. Someone was going to do it. The part that Mark talked about luck was, he was lucky that Elizabeth Warren didn't fill that space. He was lucky that Cory Booker didn't fill that space. He was lucky that someone with more conventional, who was younger, who was more conventionally attractive, more conventionally acceptable, didn't run. That's the first thing. The second thing is, you and I talk about political narrative all the time. No one has told a story that's more coherent, whether you agree with it or not, than Bernie Sanders' story about what's fucked up about America. Like the story of the billionaire class, the oligarchy, the need for political revolution, for fundamental reform, his argument, and that's really all he's done, is make an argument. You go to see Bernie Sanders on the stump, he doesn't talk about his biography, he doesn't tell jokes, he doesn't talk about his family, he makes a critique of everything that's wrong with America, and it hangs together.
The American establishment.
It's a real worldview. And the third thing is something Mark just said, and it's the most important thing, is that all of the things that we all thought, and I should say Mark Halpern and I put him on our show earlier than almost anybody and took him seriously earlier than almost anybody, but even we totally underestimated the extent to which the things that you normally would think are problems. 74-year-old stoop-shouldered Jewish guy from Burlington, Vermont, self-described socialist, cranky, dyspeptic, dandruff on his shoulders, that all of that,
get off my lawn.
That all of that added up to, in this age, a bunch of assets, because he was real. And people looked at him and said, that guy's been saying that same shit for the last 40 years. He's never changed. He's never changed. He's never trimmed. He's been consistent. And that dude is not a blow-dried, prepackaged, poll-tested politician. He's for real. And that's why kids like him. That's why he's been...
And can she win over that vote, or because they have nowhere else to go?
Mark, you know more millennials than either of us. You got some kids.
Well, I think at the end of the day, the Clinton campaign will drive a very strong message on policy and issues that ultimately will likely appeal to millennials. They're going to appeal to them on, any number of issues that matter to them, and most of them are going to be more aligned.
And will they go to the polls?
Well, that's the big question. I mean, passion drives turnout, and right now it's Sanders that's driving the passion.
Right.
Now, there may be anti-passion against Trump that drives them out. It could be a negative passion.
Do they hate each other, Secretary Clinton and Senator Sanders?
Hate's a very strong word, Charlie.
Okay. Do they intensely dislike each other? I mean, she feels like, look, I won this thing, and yet he keeps winning primaries.
Nomination fights that go on this long tends to breed a fair amount of friction.
Yeah. Which is why Jim Baker said to George Bush, get the hell out.
Yeah. I think that the friction and the intensity of the motion is nothing close to what it was between her and Barack Obama 8 years ago. I don't think it's close. And I think putting things back together between them, their campaigns, and most of their supporters in Philadelphia will be substantially easier than it was.
Why hasn't she picked up the phone to call him to say, not so much you got to get out of the race, I mean, that's his decision, but just to try to appeal to him?
Well, I don't think the candidates who are locked in combat don't talk to each other that way. And she, I think, particularly was, someone who was told to get out of the race in 2008 over and over again, and she thought it was her right to fight all the way to the last day.
So she gives him that right.
So she gives him that right too. But I will say about what Mark said, it is true that I think that the level of intensity and the level of bitterness is less than in 2008. But here's the truth: at the worst day in 2008, Barack Obama did not think Hillary Clinton was a corrupt crook, and Bernie Sanders basically thinks that Hillary Clinton's a corrupt
Because
crook.
she took money from Goldman Sachs for a speech?
Because he thinks she's everything about the oligarchy and the ruling class and the governing class that he finds corrupt and despicable. And I don't mean he finds that personally about her, but I think there's an element of she represents something that he thinks is malign in a way that Obama and Clinton were basically both establishmentarians. They were both of the cut from the same cloth
Ivy
in a
League
lot
law
of ways.
schools and all
Ivy
that.
League law schools, and they were both members of the Senate, et cetera, et cetera. I know Bernie Sanders is a senator, but he looks at her and thinks, big money, all of the things that he critiques are, you know, Clintonism.
What's your judgment, even though we're all part of the media, what's your judgment in terms of the performance of the media so far?
Same as always, abject failure. I mean, in all seriousness, I think we perform our jobs as a group as poorly as any elites in society. It's harder than it's ever been for a variety of reasons, but...
Well, like what?
Well, the economies of scale are harder to achieve because our market share, even for the biggest places, is smaller than it's ever been. And so, you know, does the New York Times have the same budget to file Freedom of Information Act requests and litigate them than they did when they had a bigger monopoly or part of a bigger duopoly? In this market, they just don't. No one does. So it's difficult to applaud the overall coverage. I will say, if you're on the right side of the digital divide, you have more access to information than ever in human history. I will say that there's been a consciousness raising in a lot of the media that if you say you're not a biased organization, you really have to not be, with some exceptions.
So when people criticize it, what do you think they're saying? Are they saying that, look, you haven't been tough enough on Donald Trump?
Not tough enough on Donald Trump, or half the country would say not tough enough on the Democrats. I think the serious criticism is not what the partisans say. They'll complain about anything. And of course, in a single tweet, I can have both Democrats and Republicans angry at me for opposite reasons, because there's a certain segment of really engaged people who just want to criticize the press and see it through their own perspective. But I think the serious criticism is not enough holding candidates accountable for their positions, demanding specifics, not enough coverage of issues, and not enough coverage of what voters are concerned about.
Some people ask, where are the issues? That this has been a campaign about spectacle and celebrity and Trump. And everybody, I've said this to this audience before, I think, I was in China, and I was in Cuba, and I was in Germany with interviewing the president. That's all they ask if you're an American in those countries, journalists, business people, people you see, is what's going on with your politics. My question is it this year simply about spectacle? And there is not a driving issue that divides. Now, we've said what we have said about Bernie Sanders and Wall Street, and we've heard Secretary Clinton on one issue after another to lay out some positions. But does it get lost so that everybody's interested in spectacle?
Well, Charlie, one of the things that's surprising, and you just think about media and the politics and the evolutionary course we're on. When I got the job to do the advertising for the presidential campaign in 2000, I went back to the beginning of television, of political television, and really studied it because I wanted to do due diligence, and I had this big responsibility I really didn't think I was prepared for, so I went back and studied it all. And what you see over time are these sort of evolutionary chapters in political communication that really changes over time, because what happens is the market gets used to it. It doesn't respond as well, it's not as effective, and then the politicians and the campaigns kind of evolve their means of communication and the way they deal with the media. The thing that I think, there's going to be books written for years about this campaign and how many of the rules have been thrown out the window, mostly by Donald Trump, but among them, it's not just Trump. Trump is a character who is doing things that I think in part it's not just him, but it's the evolution of the audience as well. And what I mean, for example, is he's doing things and saying things that in any other election cycle would have cost him the nomination. And he's doing things in just the last week or so where he is not only changing positions, but sort of transparently changing them. It's like, oh, I'm changing them. Yeah. I mean, he doesn't even sort of like hide it. It's like, yeah, I'm different. I'm going to change.
Or he says, look, this is a transaction,
or it's a transaction. But the interesting thing about it
this is just my opening gambit.
So it's interesting that he's doing that, but what's even more interesting to me is that he's not paying any price. So the audience and the voters are like, okay, that's all right, no big deal.
And that's the kind of person they want to be president?
Well, I mean, that is, we'll see, but I think it's a testament to just how fed up people are that they're willing to even entertain the notion to say, we don't really care if he's consistent in his positions, but we just want somebody who's going to do something completely different, go in there, break up a bunch of China, because the old way just hadn't worked. So we'll try something completely different.
Is this going to be a deep dive to the bottom, Mark?
Probably.
You smile with the hope? You smile with a faint hope?
I mean, look, it is common to always say every 4 years for people to say, this is going to be the dirtiest one ever. This one might be, actually. But look, part of why we like doing the circus so much is because character and personality and how a human being who wants to be president relates to other human beings is so important to voters. And while we did the show in Iowa and New Hampshire, part of what we're trying to do now going forward is show people in that human scale. And I think that, we have all heard stories, and some of us have experienced them, of both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton doing remarkably kind, gracious, human things for other people that they didn't have to do. And yet, day in and day out, as you see them as candidates, you're not really experiencing them on that level if you're
But are you showing that kind of thing on the circus? Is that what you feel like you're being able to get because you are so deeply embedded in these campaigns?
I will say, most of these candidates I've covered or known over the years to a greater or lesser extent. I learn every episode we do stuff about them from either being there or watching the footage that is subtle and human.
Give me one example.
Okay, I'll give you an example. Jeb Bush, I didn't know very well before this campaign. I have seen in our footage, some have aired, some didn't make episodes, is an incredibly short-tempered person at times, but when he is with people who are either less fortunate or young, like children, he is an extraordinarily patient person, touchingly so in spending time with people. And I never saw that. I never saw that in news footage of him standing behind a podium giving a speech. And that's a big part of what we're trying to do: show people doing stuff who want to be president and their families, doing stuff that's not just standing behind a podium giving a speech.
Yeah, I think what's interesting for me is that we've always wanted to ask questions that somehow got a sense of the person. You want to figure out what makes them tick, and you want to. I mean, it was always traditional. You'd ask, "What books are you reading?" and "What movies have you seen?" and who's on your pod list and all that kind of stuff. Favorite Smurf. That's right.
Yeah.
And all of that kind of stuff. But it seems to you suggesting that because of the presence in an off-guarded moment, you're getting more a sense of look that is not manufactured, that is not packaged.
I mean, I don't want to base the whole series on the clip we showed, but since we showed it, I think there's stuff about Trump there and the way he reacts. It's not maybe a revelation, but it's textured and nuanced. And it's more than, again, watching the 17th rally.
Well, one thing it shows he's mostly conversational. He's not the guy on stage when he's interacting with people.
Right.
Go ahead, you want to?
No, I just think that there's throughout this series, I just amplifying what Mark said, I think, we actually probably know these candidates, before we started doing this. I think, collectively, we have a better personal relationship, not better, but we have more greater familiarity with what these people are like in real life than like a lot of reporters are, because one of the stories of our time in covering presidential politics and the time that Mark and I have come up doing this over the last 25 years has been just the increasing walled offness of candidates and the lack of access, and the stories back from the old days of 1972 and Hunter Thompson taking a piss at the urinal next to George McGovern. You don't get that opportunity anymore, and God knows, we all would love to have taken a piss next to George McGovern at the urinal, But you don't get to see that anymore. You don't get that kind of interaction. But we've been lucky and have had a chance to do that. And I think one of the things about this show, whether it's with Trump, as Mark just suggested, or I was in Bernie Sanders' hotel suite on the night of the Iowa caucuses, with him as he stood there watching the television, not knowing whether he'd won or lost, and having him turn to me and ask me, "Did I do okay? In this moment, have I won? Have I lost? Is it all right? What's the press going to say?"
What did you say to him?
I said, I thought that by coming as close as he did, whether he won or lost, he would get a nice, lift out of this.
But it was a really human, vulnerable moment,
right.
Where he was feeling vulnerable, and he reached out to John. I would say, Charlie, too, that it's not just the candidates. There are all these people in the orbits of these candidates, staff, family, that are really interesting characters as well. In fact, I'd say two of the most interesting people that we've featured in the series have been Jane Sanders,
right,
who's been kind of this rock star, and because you could see through her eyes, she's just, she reminds you of your friend next door, or your favorite aunt, or whoever it is, but very, very down to earth. But you could see through her eyes and her experience this oh my God, we're winning, and to see that through her eyes and to see her kind of in the shadows, brushing the dandruff off Bernie's shoulder before he go to do a speech and give him a little kiss on the cheek, just powerful human little moments. And another example is I was in Elko, Nevada, which is in the middle of nowhere. It's 2,000 people in the northwest corner of Nevada, and northwest, and north. No,
I'll Google.
Okay,
Pretty sure.
It's in Nevada. It's in Nevada where nobody else is, but it's because of the weird.
So remote that Mark didn't even know where he was.
That's right. But it's a very Twin Peaks-ish kind of spot, but in
a good way.
But in a good way. But the point is that for reasons of delegate, what have you, the entire Republican universe came through that on one day before the caucuses, and Donald Trump couldn't make it, so he sent his son Donald Jr. And it was the first time that he had ever given a public speech, and we just sort of accidentally bumped into him sort of in the wings and had this very extended conversation with him. And it was very interesting talking to somebody who was in Donald Trump's orbit, who was his progeny, and was about to go out and do his first surrogate work on the national stage, which is a pretty bright spotlight, and to see his reaction, his human sort of response to what, the weight of that responsibility and how he handled it,
right,
and watching him do it. It was really interesting. But we have the resources and the number of people that we can cover the whole field and sort of pick out these players and things that are, sort of at the edge of the stage rather than center stage.
I'm not a big I told you so guy, but is there a way for me to project my iPhone output on this screen? Show everybody the map here. There you go.
All right. Who's on the short list for Hillary Clinton for vice president?
Northeast Nevada.
John, short list. Clinton.
I don't know that there is a short list, and I generally try to resist speculation about vice presidents, partly because I don't think they matter very much, and also partly because there's a moment where there will be a short list, and when that short list exists, hopefully we will know what it is and we'll be able to talk about it. At this point, I don't believe there is one in the Clinton campaign, and so it's like now just speculating. I could talk about like who various people bandy about. I mean, there's been some discussion. And I think there will, for reasons that we talked about at the very top of this, I think there's a chance that she'll put Elizabeth Warren on the ticket. I'm not saying she's on a list. I'm not reporting that.
Mark doesn't think that for a second. He doesn't think that she wants to live with Elizabeth Warren.
She may very well not. But I think there's some chance that if Hillary Clinton decides that she needs the energy of the progressive voters, she's not going to be able to claim them from Bernie Sanders, and she needs to win with women in a really dramatic way. It's not, again, I'm not saying it's my pick or I think it's most likely. Do I think that she'll get a look? I do.
Yeah.
I do.
This is a bit like Bill Clinton selecting Al Gore.
It would be if she did it. And it would double down on the historic nature of her candidacy.
Yeah. How about Trump, Mark?
He told the Associated Press today that he's down to 5 or 6 people.
Yeah, exactly.
And
the list is there.
Chris Christie's one of them.
Yeah.
That would be the double down strategy, right?
Yeah.
I didn't realize we had so many New Jersey people in the crowd tonight. But
so, Mark, who's on the list? Is Senator Thune on the list?
I know a fair amount about who people around him would like to be on the list or whatever, but I don't really know except for I actually have thought for a while it'd be Governor Christie.
Because he's a good campaigner.
He's the best political brawler in American politics, and to win this race, they're going to need to do a lot of brawling, and I think Trump would like kind of a tag team on that. I think that somebody like Secretary Bob Gates or Mitch Daniels would revolutionize.
Former Secretary of Defense, Bob Gates.
And Mitch Daniels, who's now the head of Purdue, was the governor.
Bob Gates wouldn't do this in 1,000 years.
Well, we don't have 1,000 years before now we'd have to decide. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know that he would. I don't know that he wouldn't. But I'm saying If Trump could convince Bob Gates or Mitch Daniels to do it, I think it would revolutionize the race. I think he would
Revolutionize means make it instantly a toss-up?
The main reason you need to pick somebody, right, is to tell the country that you do something responsible with your first big decision in the public spotlight. And those two guys, I think that by the press and the elites and by the public eventually, since neither of them is all that well known, would say, wow, that's a guy who could really help govern. I feel better about Trump's judgment. I feel better about who he'd put in his government. And I feel better that there's somebody to be sitting beside him with a lot of experience while he made decisions. So I think if he can get somebody like that, Christie's not, I don't think, the same reassuring figure to a lot of people.
All right.
I think Mark, just to be fair, Mark is literally the only person in America who thinks of Mitch Daniels as being a revolutionary figure. I think that's fair.
But I'll just say,
he was a good governor of Indiana.
He
has said he will pick someone with Washington experience, not a business person, not a military person. And so I think the list maybe isn't all that long, as he said today.
But who do you think would be a perfect choice?
Well, I'll tell you what I think would be perfect and is never going to happen.
Who's that?
I do think we are very much
Bernie Sanders.
I think we're I think we're very, and this is more improbable than Bernie Sanders. I think we are really entering a post-partisan, post-ideological age, and I think that's part of the attraction for Trump, is that just people are so tired of sort of partisan politics. And Hillary Clinton, because she's been through so much of that, I think, ironically, to a lot of people, kind of gets that. I've done a bunch of work in a bipartisan effort called No Labels, trying to facilitate problem solving between the different factions and the parties, and she's expressed a lot of interest in that. I just go back to John McCain in 2008, and there was very serious consideration for him at one time to pick Joe Lieberman.
Right.
And I remember that I love that idea. I love Joe Lieberman. But I mean, the sort of tradition, first of all, it leaked out, problematic because of Lindsey Graham. I accidentally, and that killed it. But it killed it because people heard about it and they said, if that happens, half the convention is going to walk out. I think that would have been fantastic. I think that would have been great for McCain to have half the convention walked out. He said, I care so much about the future of the country. You know, I don't care about these partisans. I'm going to do what's best and do kind of a post-partisan, you know. So for Hillary Clinton, what would be like a complete out-of-the-box post-partisan thing? Colin Powell.
Colin Powell is like 79.
I occasionally find myself wondering what Mark is smoking and then wanting some for myself.
All right, so we'll go younger. Condoleezza Rice.
Well, there you go. So if there is an issue campaign, if there is, what are the big issues in this campaign? Is it about simply capacity to lead the country? Is it about a vision of the country that is defined by these issues?
Charlie, let me say one thing to just start off this conversation, which is that...
Issues don't matter.
Pardon me?
Issues don't matter?
They matter, but having looked at this a lot, people are much more single-issue voters when it comes to local elections and state elections, congressional and Senate elections. In presidential elections, there's this whole constellation of issues that people care about, but the things that they really look at are attributes, and the attributes that are most important are strength, perception of strength, values, and trust. Right. And you got to knock those out first. And so
you have to have those.
Well, and so just as an example, in 2000, on 8 out of 10 issues, maybe it was 9 out of 10, people agreed with Al Gore. But when it came to who they thought was the stronger president, George Bush beat him by 20 points. And that's why they beat him. They thought
he also seemed the most human, more human.
Right. Sure.
But go back
that's a values component. People said he's like me.
Right.
Go back to 2012, okay. when in the last election, when Mitt Romney, according to the exit polls, led Barack Obama on managing the economy, on strength, on fixing Washington. The only thing that he didn't lead Obama on was one thing, which was cares about people like us. Obama won that by like an 80-20 margin, and that was the election. It was an empathy election.
Yeah, you swing any one of those three by a margin like that.
But that was it. That's what people cared about, given the state of the economy, projecting, caring about people like you and me.
So the interesting thing...
I just think in this election, to go back to Mark, and I'm actually agreeing with Mark about this, I just think what we've seen so far, Trump's analysis of why he won, I think is not wrong, which is that, in the age of Paris and San Bernardino, a couple of big defining moments happened where Trump seemed like the strongest Republican candidate. And he is going to, I think, wage an election on the basis of strength. And at this time, especially if there's another terror event that happens between now and November, which, given the pace at which we've been experiencing them, does not seem at all improbable, that strength as an attribute, to Mark's point, could be more the defining feature of this election, that we're back to a strength election rather than an empathy election.
What's interesting about that is that
that doesn't mean Trump will win, by the way, because competence factors into that, right? And in a dangerous world, Hillary Clinton may turn out to be the better balance.
Maybe it's about perception, and you're right, because Donald Trump constantly says that I'm the strongest, I'm the best, I'm this. But if you ask people like Bob Gates and David Petraeus and military people,
huge fans of Hillary Clinton.
Huge fans of Hillary Clinton. Yeah. If you talk about strength, those tough guys.
That's why I say I don't think necessarily strength doesn't necessarily favor Trump. It doesn't necessarily mean Trump wins.
I'll give you three things that are like issues. They're closer to issues. They're not pure issues like education or infrastructure. Right. One is, I think, who will change Washington in a way that will raise the household incomes of working families?
Very good question.
Who will go to Washington and reorient how things work there?
And the answer to that is?
I think that's a big debate, because I think that people have fundamental faith. People who like Trump have fundamental faith that he'll do things differently, and they don't like the way, they don't think things are working now, right? Yeah. Wrong track. People think the country's on the wrong track. Two is on national security. I think, again, not a pure issue, but who will reorder America's role in the world so we are simultaneously safer and richer? That the international economic order that Tom Friedman and others have written so much about is no longer disadvantaging America with China and its currency, with immigration, with trade deals. Again, doesn't mean Trump will win that fight, even though he's emphasized those issues, but who will reorient us, still keeping us safe, but allow us to get richer. And then the last issue, I think, relates to just all the things here at home that people are frustrated about, not just the question of household incomes, but infrastructure, fixing the Affordable Care Act in some way to make it work better. Just the big programs that everybody relies on: transportation, health care, Social Security, everything that the federal government does domestically. Who seems to have some broad notions of how they should change to serve people better?
In 2000, in the last Bush election, was it a referendum on Bush or a referendum on Kerry?
Well, in 2000.
Yeah, no, that was Gore. 2004.
Well, let me frame it this way. The interesting thing about the difference between the 2000 and 2004 elections is that, and you can kind of relate it to this election, which is that generally when we start on a political election, we try and determine, is it a change or a status quo election? In other words, are people think the country's screwed up and want to change in direction, or they kind of like where we're going? Just that's a very fundamental axis. In 2000, that axis favored Al Gore and the Democrats. People just generally, it was kind of a status quo election, but we kind of reframed the argument in a different way strategically as sort of a cultural one, changing the culture to fix the cultural drift. But it was a time, so we were saying things are great, it's time for a change, right? Which is counterintuitive. 2004, it's just the opposite strategically, it's flipped. Now, we're the president, people don't like the direction of the country, less than 50% of the people like the policies or Bush himself, and now we're in a position of arguing for the status quo in a change election, so we're saying, things are screwed up, stay the course. So it's kind of an interesting strategic balance. But the thing about—
You describe it that way, it's hard to believe you won either one of those elections. I still don't understand it.
But the thing about Kerry that I'll just say is that, in so many of these elections, it's all about who you're running against. I would argue that Howard Dean, even though people, because of the Dean scream and all this stuff, they said, oh God, he would have flamed out as a candidate. I don't think so. I think he would have been a better candidate against Bush because his strengths matched Bush's strengths. He was clear, consistent, vocal, kind of a hard ass, but that's what Bush was. What they didn't like about John Kerry was, even if they liked his positions, they weren't quite sure where he's going to be, not consistent.
You guys have to do that because of the windsurfing and all those ads.
Well, but he helped us do that by saying
Karl Rove said the gift that kept on giving.
Right, it was the gift that kept on giving, but he's the one that created that gift and gave it to us.
All right.
by voting against the appropriation that he said he would vote for.
So is this election about the future or the status quo? About the future.
Well, you know, I'd said before, what's President Obama's approval rating? What's the rate of economic growth? How are people feeling about the direction of the country? I believe that Hillary Clinton can win, even if people aren't feeling good about things, if she does what Barack Obama did to Mitt Romney, what George Bush did to John Kerry.
Define them.
Disqualify them. Define them to such an extent that they're disqualified, that they're not an acceptable choice. If Donald Trump, and these are the debates will be so important, if Donald Trump is seen as an acceptable choice, perfectly acceptable to be commander-in-chief, perfectly acceptable to be staffing the cabinet, he'll win.
Which raises let's hear this clearly, if he can define himself as an acceptable choice, he'll win. That's all he needs.
Well, that's a lot.
I know, but that's what he has to do.
But
define himself as an acceptable choice.
Or if you put it this way, if he can resist and
being
fend
defined
off
as unacceptable.
her relentless effort to define him as unacceptable, armed with a lot of ammunition that he will give her and has already given her.
Will Barack Obama play a role?
yes,
How so?
it's just my instinct and
That he'll want to.
that I think he wants to. I mean, I think he's going to be everywhere that they will let him be in the fall. I think he sees this as a referendum on his presidency and as an extension of his presidency, as the third term of his presidency. And I think he sees this as a way to, heal whatever perceptive rift there might have been between the Clintons and the Obamas. This is a way to cement his legacy.
Whatever you think about Barack Obama, he's achieved a huge amount of stuff. I mean, big, giant things, right? The Affordable Care Act, Dodd-Frank, the Iran deal. Those are big things. Very controversial. A lot of people in the country hate those things, but those are big achievements. Those are big lifts. And I think his attitude is, the only way to preserve those gains is to make sure a Democrat gets reelected. And he knows that he knows that he has, I mentioned that one, the Iran deal. I think he knows that he has a special purchase with the coalition that he built. The coalition, some people call it the coalition of the ascendant, with young voters and African Americans, Hispanics, college-educated white women. He has built a powerful coalition for 2 elections. The biggest question, though, he will go out and campaign, I think, like crazy for her to try to drive turnout in those groups. The question is, and it's like one of the bigger questions, one of the many big questions we've cited tonight is, what do those people go out and vote for a candidate, vote at Barack Obama's urging for a candidate who's not Barack Obama?
We're in a bit of not uncharted but unusual territory. You think about President Reagan didn't campaign for George Bush very much. Bill Clinton didn't campaign for Al Gore very much because Al Gore didn't want him out there. George Bush didn't campaign for John McCain very much because McCain didn't want him out there. So it's been a long time since we've had an incumbent president leaving office and going out full throttle for the chosen candidate of their party.
I got a lot of questions, but I want to get, these are things that they gave me that came in. Sanders.
That's the voice of the people, Charlie.
Yes.
These cards are a bunch of. Be nice to the audience. Come on.
The audience knows I'm on their side. I've been here.
Peace.
I'm family. They know that. You're the newcomer. You're using Trump-like language.
I know. I just was giving you a little demonstration of what Trump was going to try to do to Hillary in the debates.
First one, and I was the one making sure that they had their questions asked. Number 1, Sanders and NBC are claiming victory in West Virginia. What does that mean?
It means somebody's on their iPhone during this event.
Yeah, it sure means that. All right. Now, does it mean anything that Sanders gets another win?
I mean, the more he wins, the more she has to fight harder to win so she doesn't end on a losing streak. The more delegates he gets, the more influence he'll have over the platform, his speaking slot. He hopes kind of over the general tone of the debate.
I think it also just makes it harder. I think it gives all those Sanders supporters just a little more fuel in the tank to say, that he should be the guy.
Okay, Mark.
Let me just say one thing that people will focus on. If I saw the number right as I was coming in, the exit polls suggest that 1/3 of the people who voted in the Democratic primary tonight plan to vote for Trump in the general election.
Wow.
West Virginia.
In West Virginia.
And that's not considered Trump territory, is it?
Well,
no, it is actually.
It is.
Appalachia.
White, working class white voters.
Yeah.
So
those are people.
It's going to get a lot
But
of attention.
who took West Virginia in 2012?
The Republicans have won it since
96.
Since
Okay,
96.
All right.
Or since 2000, right?
But those are probably a lot of anti-Hillary Cole voters.
Coal voters.
Coal.
Yeah.
Coal, right, right.
Yeah.
Okay,
They're
this is for you, Mark.
Yeah.
Is it possible for Hillary Clinton to shake the label Crooked Hillary? Your silence speaks volumes.
Well, yeah, I think, I mean, the one thing that she's got enormous super PAC money raised already that'll be out there softening the terrain. I have no inside knowledge about where the resolution of the email thing will go, but my general sense is that for most independent voters that, you know, that is not, whatever the outcome of it, it's not a criminal offense. You know, that it may have been lazy, it may have been convenient, whatever. I mean, it's not like she was sharing secrets with the North Koreans. So I think that.
So you say.
Yeah. I don't think
my sense is that it's a bridge
but you have
too
to have
far.
You'd have to have intent, too.
Yeah, and there has to be intent. So I think in part that will resolve itself.
Okay.
But just to be clear, though, I think, and again, I'm not saying that I think this is going to work, but I think the label that he's given her is not about the email investigation.
I don't either.
It's about a broad. He's trying to go straight at
The trustworthiness issue.
trustworthiness and her character,
Right.
and that's a loose label that goes to a bunch of things that he believes, Trump believes, will be problematic for her that go to the Clinton Foundation.
I think that's something that Barack Obama can help her with. I mean,
Sorry?
I think he can wrap her up a bit on that issue
Does the
and hug her up
press like
as trustworthy.
Does the press like Donald Trump more than they like Hillary Clinton?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, there's more entertainment value. There's more copy. There's more to write about.
Well, but I think it's more than that. I think, look, one of the things, and Mark and I could probably do like a PhD dissertation about this, is that, you know, the press has been.
He's in his thinking mode there. Look.
But I know this is the thing about which we have a high degree of mind meld. The press is extraordinarily cynical. Reflexively negative towards Hillary Clinton and has been for a really long time. They were that way in 2008, and they are that way again now. And some of it you can explain, and some of it you can't explain. Because, like, I see young reporters who are covering their first cycle this year, and, like, literally at the beginning of the cycle, they had no idea who Vince Foster was. They couldn't tell you anything about the 1990s. They didn't know what Whitewater was. But they still basically thought, she's lying to us all the time. She's calculated, she's scheming. Like, the genetic code of Clinton skepticism, not hatred, but Clinton, you know, the gimlet eye. You know, you looked at her and gave her, looked askance. Was like, this is great fun to cover her. She's exciting, she's inspiring. This is a great story to tell. But rather, she crooked Hillary, you know, for a lot of reporters. And it got passed down through some weird osmotic thing where even young reporters who never covered any of the stuff in the 90s or anything else, they still feel that way. Where the general attitude towards Trump is, he's fun to cover. And most reporters don't know Donald Trump, but he's new, he's fresh, he's exciting, he's controversial.
You guys seem to be enjoying Mar-a-Lago.
I enjoy being around all presidential candidates. I find them fascinating. I find Donald Trump fascinating. But there is no doubt that the press is as caught up in the newness, the freshness, the betterness of the story, the magnetism that many of them feel towards Trump in a weird, twisted way, in the same way as they were with Barack Obama 8 years ago.
Mr. Halper?
I've said this before in public, and I always try to say it carefully. Hillary Clinton and her husband have brought some of this on themselves, to say the least. But in my career, I have rarely seen, and really almost never seen, the unfairness with which the Clintons are systematically treated by the press. I'm not her advocate, and as I said, they bring some of it on themselves. But I've been covering them since I was in my 20s, and there's just a syndrome. If you're issued a press pass, you're supposed to just hate the Clintons, never trust them, never give them credit for anything they do, and question everything they do as if they are automatically guilty of everything.
Crooked Hillary.
And I've spoken out against it, and I try not to fall into it. Although again, sometimes they make that hard. But it is the strangest thing, and I will say, the press tends to favor Democratic candidates. Okay. In 2000 and 2004, part of why George W. Bush was able to win twice was not just because he had smart people working for him, but because the press preferred George Bush to both Al Gore and John Kerry. And I think there's a real danger for Hillary Clinton that she will be on the short end once again of press coverage, because as she was against Barack Obama, which is the election which I thought was the most outrageous I've ever covered. I'm not saying anything negative about President Obama, but he got more favorable coverage in her hometown paper than she did by far. And she's in danger of losing.
The New York Times.
Yeah. She's in danger of losing this election if she's in danger of.
Charlie, can I just talk?
Because Trump will day in and day out get better coverage than she does, and there's almost nothing her staff can do about it. I think she's going to have to find a way to diffuse that.
Mark?
I was just going to say, I just want to talk about the power and importance of authenticity and how that can and could work for Hillary Clinton. She is candid in the sense that she has said recently in this campaign that she recognizes that her husband is a better campaigner than she is. She knows that's not her core strength. I mean, she's a competent manager.
He's a better campaigner than most people.
Yeah, best ever. You know, Hall of Fame, first ballot, no question. But one of the most powerful moments in her electoral history was in 2008. Barack Obama wins Iowa, shocks the world. Suddenly he goes from being down to up double digits in New Hampshire. They go up to a New Hampshire campaign, and just a day or so before that, when she's down double digits, there's a little town hall. Somebody throws her a softball question, and suddenly this battleship Clinton kind of breaks down. It's this very vulnerable moment.
Like it's not easy.
Like, yeah, that's exact her words. She says it's not easy being at her. And it's this very human, vulnerable moment. You can tell she's got the flu. She's just feeling sick. And she kind of tears up, and it's like this. It's like, wow, there's this human being in there, and she articulates a clear rationale for her candidacy in this very powerful human moment. So, I think that I hope that she looks for more opportunities to do,
like maybe appearances in a weekly
series, to be with us in the circus,
all access.
But I mean, I know you guys hate for me to bring this back to the circus.
Oh, we hate that.
But I mean, that's what you hope you'll be able to do, is capture some of the.
That's precisely the sorts of opportunities we want to give all candidates.
Behind-the-scenes human moments.
Well, and just one button on that, which is to say, part of the inspiration for this was the documentary that was done on Mitt Romney. It showed 6 months after the election. It was a terrific documentary. Everybody saw that, including Mitt Romney, and said, "Where was that guy in the election?" You know, it just showed.
So where was that guy?
Well, that guy didn't allow. First of all, he didn't allow. They made a deal and said you can't show this till 6 months after the election. They now realize
but I mean, the point is, where was this guy on the campaign trail?
Well,
why wasn't he not seen?
Well, he was doing just like Hillary Clinton. He's like, buttoned up, a battleship. We're in the bubble, and we don't want to show that.
What are your thoughts about Andrew Sullivan's article in New York Magazine? I mean, that requires you to all have read it to be intrigued, but it basically tried to explain Trump.
It was very long.
Very long. Okay. All right, John. What would Hunter?
I love Andrew Sullivan. I haven't read the story though.
Yeah. You haven't read the story?
I haven't read it. Sorry.
Have you read it, Mark?
I'm busy, Charlie.
Mark.
He
have you read the story?
He used to work at New York Magazine.
Have you read the story?
It was really long.
Have you read the story?
No, I haven't.
I'm sure it's brilliant. And I mean that seriously. I'm sure it's great. Andrew's really smart.
I hear a lot about it.
Yeah.
Did you read in The Atlantic a piece about Barack Obama's foreign policy called the Obama Doctrine?
Of course not, Charlie. That was long, too. Not all of us are superhuman enough to do 3 television shows and be able to read these giant articles.
He's actually got 4 shows.
Whatever.
4, that's right.
4 shows, 17 shows.
Maybe I'm just lonely.
I guess.
All right, John, this is for you.
Or you've got a harem that reads the stories to you. I don't know.
In my dreams. Yeah. What will Hunter S. Thompson think of the 2016 election? Now, there's a man I loved, Hunter Thompson.
You mean if he were alive?
Yes, of course you mean that.
Okay. I'm just saying. I mean,
well, the only man that brought scotch to my green room. Go ahead.
Imagine how much fun he'd be having with Donald Trump.
Exactly.
I mean,
Fear and Loathing.
Well, by the way, I made that mandatory reading for all our production crew.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Fear and Loathing on Fifth Avenue.
Yeah, Fear and Loathing on Fifth Avenue. Okay. If Trump becomes president,
I think he would be just vicious. He would just be vicious and insanely acerbic towards both of them.
But do we have that? Who is Hunter S. Thompson? Who's reflecting that kind of voice?
No one.
Really?
No.
Now, why? Is it because no appetite? No one. What?
It's because he was
not enough LSD.
It's because he was that great.
Yeah, not enough really good window pane.
What was it?
Come on, no acid heads out here? Come on, people.
Upper East Side, not
Yeah,
the home to a lot of acid heads.
Yeah. Not enough good Chablis? Is that better for you?
No. Hunter Thompson drank scotch.
Yeah, he's a once-in-a-generation kind of talent. But
I agree. That's
and
his
also
talent.
because it's just, I mean, one of the great things about him was, of course, that he was an equal opportunity savager across party lines. And unfortunately, I mean, we are not savagers, but we do try to be tough and fair and equal measure to both parties. There are not as many journalists around like that anymore because a lot of the press is much more partisan. And Hunter Thompson was not partisan.
And online has made that true. I mean, the internet's made that true.
And I got to say, he's singular. There's just
exactly.
nobody
That's
like
fair enough. But you guys are writing another book. This is a third campaign book? No.
Haven't
Really,
decided.
we are?
You're not?
Haven't decided. What do you
Really,
think?
you haven't decided. So
We're
my
working
question,
on this show, The Circus, which takes up a lot of time.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know,
Haven't decided.
if you work smartly and you work efficiently, you can do it.
Again.
Don't make me ask you in front of everyone here how that book of yours is going.
You know my publisher. If Trump becomes president, would that be the worst thing in the world?
What tone is that written in?
It's more like this. If Trump should become president, would you boys think that would be the worst thing in the world? Now, is that the way to write, right? It's like Johnny Carson. Yeah. Mark, would it be the worst thing in the world?
I think it's a massive failure of the imagination or a sense of like world history or what's going on in a lot of places around the world. I think it's the worst thing in the world. Like there are places, I mean, you can think whatever you want to think about Donald Trump, but there are places in the world right now that systematically oppress large segments of their society, that are trying to develop nuclear weapons, that are terrorist enclaves. Right. There's like
genocide.
There's genocide going on. There's incredibly awful shit that goes on over the world today, not just 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And Donald Trump may be a dangerous president, might be a president you totally disagree with, but I mean, I just find it insane that people like compare Donald Trump to Hitler. It's like, it's crazy. Crazy.
I know that there are people in the room who, because of what Trump has already done, you just consider him disqualified. I have enough confidence in the voters that he will not get elected unless he's proven to the country that he's worthy of the job. So I'm not that worried about it. He will have demonstrated a fitness for the office, or he won't get the office.
You have a trust in America.
Yeah,
I think that's right.
Why?
I think that's right.
I do. I think
that there's going to be a 6-month period where people are going to really evaluate, and he's got to evolve in a big way to show that he's got the
and that's actually exactly what happened with Ronald Reagan, isn't it? I mean, because there was sort of Dr. Frankenstein kind of thing, and then.
Exactly.
All right, Mark, this is what someone wrote: if you could craft the perfect political attack ad for both parties about the opposing candidates, what would they each look like? So I'm asking you to compose for Hillary Clinton against Donald Trump an attack ad that will deliver a...
Well, I think that the most effective line of attack that began to kind of rattle Donald Trump was when Marco Rubio and others sort of going after the fraud component to say that when they went at Trump University, and that he was take advantage of people who didn't have the means and were duped, and so it was a billionaire taking advantage of the little people. Yeah. I mean, to me, in the dynamic of economic inequality, if you've got this, if you can make a provable case, and I think there's a lot of material out there that they're going to throw at him to say he really doesn't care about people like you. And to Mark's point about Obama or John's, that's a fundamental component. I mean, even George Bush was able to make that argument that he cared about people like you. And if you can drive an axe into that and to say, no, he really doesn't. This is all a game. It was a game from the very beginning. He never really even thought he'd get the nomination. He was just fooling around. His whole deal is to go out and game you, and he's not fit to be president. Yeah. And so I think we're going to see people talk. I think we're going to see ads with the people who went to Trump University and felt that they
Mark, you have told me that the Clinton campaign they're loaded with negative stuff that they've been collecting.
Including a lot of people who were economic victims of Donald Trump's practices. Yeah. So I think you'll see a lot of that, too.
In terms of on video, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if, in fact, you're Donald Trump against Hillary Clinton, what's the attack ad? This is the question.
Run the headline that Hillary got indicted. If she was indicted.
Yeah. This is an aspiring, last one from here. As an aspiring journalist in college, I noticed that it's been taken, I can't read the handwriting, it's been taken over by social media. Though as an aspiring journalist, I noticed that our field, journalism, has been taken over by social media. What measures should we take in emphasizing the importance of reading a story in full rather than a post or a tweet?
Like the New York Magazine article by Andrew Sullivan?
No. I'm sorry, I think it's important to read.
Yeah. You have to apologize, Charlie.
Go ahead. Mark.
Yeah, I said before, if you're on the right side of the digital divide, there's a ton of stuff out there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of old-fashioned about this. I think parents just have to teach their children the importance of learning how to read and write well, correctly, and with style. The smartest people I know are people who grew up reading a ton. And
reading
and writing. Reading a ton, just reading all the time.
Absolutely.
And then learning how to write well. And I tell all young journalists, you know, yeah, it's important to learn how to Photoshop and Final Cut Pro and make graphics and all of that stuff, but learn how to write interesting, provocative, probing, correctly punctuated sentences.
I agree. I totally agree. Totally agree. Yeah. This is another issue we haven't quite covered. How real is the rumor that conservative groups, are willing to lose the presidency for the sake of keeping seats and majority in Congress, and therefore will back a candidate to stimulate more Republicans to vote who won't vote for Trump? I mean, I don't quite understand it, but I mean, our conservatives are not happy with Trump. I mean, you see it with Eric Erickson, you see it with a lot of other movement conservatives from one side or the other. I mean, a lot of them were for Cruz.
Yeah.
Where are they going?
A lot of them are for neither.
Right.
I mean, look, there's again. I sort of alluded to this earlier. I think there's the mass of Republican voters, and then there are Republican elites, right? And by that I mean everything from op-ed writers to think tank denizens, elected officials, lobbyists, et cetera, et cetera. But mostly in the intellectual class. There are genuinely a lot of conservatives. We know plenty of them who think that Donald Trump is not a conservative. Right. They think he's bad for the Republican Party. They think that if, as the nominee, that he will not just lose the presidency, but will destroy the Republican Party or rip it in half in the process of being the party's nominee. And they would like to try to find a way to either stop him. Some of them worry that the worst thing in the world would be if he won the presidency for what they believe is conservatism, and so they think that they'd like to. They tried to stop him. Yeah. They tried to stop him in the nomination fight, and some of them now are trying to figure out a way to stop him by running a third-party candidate who would either be able to keep anyone from getting to 270 electoral votes and throw the election to the House, or would at least be a protest vehicle whereby if you are in what they would consider a principled conservative, at least you'd have somewhere to park your vote, so you wouldn't have to vote for Hillary Clinton and wouldn't have to vote for Donald Trump, who they think is neither. Is that a thing? Is that a real thing? That is a real thing. That's real. Okay. But will there actually be a candidate like that, a third-party candidate who has any effect on this race? I think the chances are not that high. And because for most people who have to actually go out and be that candidate, like running for president sucks. It's really hard, and you get beaten up. And Donald Trump attacks you, and Hillary Clinton attacks you, and the whole infrastructure of American politics is geared against third-party runs. And so you have to find some person who's willing to take on that burden, knowing that they're almost certain not to win. Right. Like, I don't see a lot of people like that out there pining for this gig.
Well, of course, the irony is that a year ago, the Republicans were forcing Donald Trump to sign a pledge that he wouldn't go run as a third party. Right. And now, of course, the Republican Party is considering doing exactly that. Okay, but let me just say, let's assume that Donald Trump obviously gets the nomination. Let's assume that that the debates don't go, which could really, I agree with Mark, could turn this whole thing around. Because it did for Reagan. That's what turned it around. Let's assume that Trump does not turn it around.
And let's assume he loses bad.
Yeah.
What does it mean for the Republican Party? And I think you could argue that so if it was so bad that it took the House away and took the Senate away. But I mean, for all those people who say this could destroy the Republican Party, could it, or do parties always regain their?
Well, I've been saying for a while that that the Republican Party needed to burn the House down and rebuild from the foundation up.
Yeah.
And we may be headed.
What kind of party would it become?
Well, I mean, I have my own thoughts about what it. I think it should be much more socially liberal and maintain its economic. I mean, be sort of more Rockefeller Republican in its nature. But there are people who have completely different opinions about that, like Ted Cruz. I mean, Ted Cruz's argument was that we haven't elected somebody conservative enough. And in some ways, I kind of wish that had happened so we could test that theory out to say, okay, is that right or wrong? I mean, Ted Cruz is going to come back now, I guarantee you, and say, if Donald Trump loses, he's going to say it's because we didn't elect somebody conservative enough, and he'll be running in 2020.
If I'd been running in 2016, I would have won.
But if Donald Trump loses, I mean, like I said, I mean, his candidacy so far, and I think increasingly was likely to be non-ideological. I mean, he's to the left of Hillary Clinton on several sort of big issues. So in terms of like an orthodoxy or an ideology, if he loses, I think we'll just kind of go back to
And if he wins?
If he wins, then I think that the Republicans are going to say, great, we're
Yeah, we have 3 branches of government.
Yeah.
I mean, we have two branches of Congress and the presidency.
But to be clear, though, it depends on if he wins, how he wins.
Yeah.
And I mean, if Trump were to win the presidency by running on the basis of policies that are in fundamental, stark opposition to what Paul Ryan and most House Republicans and Mitch McConnell and most Senate Republicans believe on trade, on foreign policy, on economic policy, on taxes, on entitlements, on social issues. I mean, again, all of those things he has spoken of and expressed at various times views that were total apostasies to conservative orthodoxy. If he ran and won on the basis of a bunch of apostasies, what would that mean to have a president whose actual views, policies, and ideology were in opposition to the Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader? What would they then produce? What agenda would then occur? I don't know the answer to that question, but it's not clear-cut to me what it would mean for the future of the Republican Party or what the actual legislations are that they could come to an agreement on.
Last question. Is this because of the nature of the Trump candidacy, because of the rise of social media and a candidate tweeting all the time, is this an election that will change American politics forever?
I think it has already. I really do. I mean, I think in terms of, how Trump has changed the rules about media and dominated with social media, how it's changed the kind of rules about candidates calling into television shows. I think that's fundamentally changed a lot of things. And like I said, I think we'll be writing books for years about just how dramatically this election has changed the way politics is conducted in America.
And I totally disagree. Yeah. I think people thought Barack Obama changed politics forever. You have to have a brand that is special and different to make all the new technology work. I think you said, let's say Trump loses and the Republicans are starting to run against Hillary Clinton in 4 years. And they'll say, oh, let's emulate Donald Trump. And you call the Today Show and say, hey, I'd like to do a phoner.
Yeah, right.
They'll say, ha, no.
Yeah, right.
And you say,
it's like generals fighting in the last war.
I'm going to tweet something provocative and it'll lead the news tonight. And your 14,000 followers don't allow you to lead the news. I think if Trump wins, he'll obviously wreak a lot of change on the party and the country and how you run for president. But the notion that he's left a template behind that other people can use, I just don't see, because he's special, he's different. He's got the ability to do things that literally no one who's ever run for president has had the ability to do.
So I just think that my colleagues here just answered in the context of like running campaigns. Will they change the conduct of politics? Those are legitimate ways of thinking about this. But to go back to the earlier discussion, which is if Trump is the Republican nominee, which he's likely to be, there is one perfectly plausible scenario, maybe the likeliest scenario, that Hillary Clinton will win in a landslide. And if she wins in a landslide, and if that landslide is large enough and Republicans lose control of the Senate and the House, this is to Mark's point about, like, the House gets burned down. Like, we thought after 2012, when the Republicans ended and lost the popular vote for the 5th out of the last 6 elections, and they had an autopsy on their party and said, okay, the party's dead now. What do we need to do to fix it?
Reach out.
They've done none of those things, right? So if Trump now becomes the nominee in opposition to the Republican establishment and everything else, becomes the nominee, and then the party loses control of both branches of the House, both branches of the federal legislature, and doesn't have the White House, is that the moment where Trump does change American politics fundamentally, because he causes the actual moment of reckoning in the Republican Party, where the party has to say, okay, we really need to change now and not be the same party that's lost 6 of the last 7 popular votes and now no longer holds any branch of government in Washington. That would be a pretty big change in American politics.
Let me just finally say the following. If you like this, you'll certainly like the Circus. You'll certainly like With All Due Respect. And you'll certainly like whatever book that they're going to write. And I've enjoyed it, and I hope you have. Thank you so much.